Welcome to the Mac Power Users. I'm David Sparks and joined by Mr. Stephen Robles. How are you today, Stephen?
I'm doing great, David. Looking at my XDR, you're especially colorful and contrasty. How you
am
doing?
I? Now, if I move really fast, do you get me in all the frames?
Promotion, yeah, I do promotion. It's funny, the most promotion I see is the genie effect when I minimize an app.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, look at that, it's so smooth.
That's yeah. So I have the fancy studio display, and the time I really notice it is whenever I load DevonThink, because one of the panes in DevonThink, like one of the games, is like super bright. I don't know what they did, but it's taking advantage of the full, all the
HDR.
nits, you know?
Yes,
And I'm like, oh yeah, I have a pro display.
You know? I do, and I notice it too when I go to adjust my brightness, and I see that my brightness is like 20%. I'm like, wow, that's so low. And then I'll just play around with it, and like, it's literally blinding me right now. I just raise the brightness all the way.
You get a sunburn from it. Yeah,
exactly.
We are going to go. So Stephen got a new Pro Display XDR. He also got one of the new MacBook Neos. Stephen being Stephen made an excellent video setting it up and showing it off. We'll put it in the links. I really, Stephen, the part where you're trying to hang it on your mount and you're getting it wrong, and I love so much that you kept that in. And I don't know, it just endeared you to me so much when I was watching you hang that mount.
Oh, well, thank you. It was the Studio Display XDR is what I got, and the VESA mount I have is so convenient, supposed to be, where you can just unscrew one bolt and then the whole thing slides up and then allows you to do the 4 screws on the actual mount, swap it. And I was so excited that I forgot that part. And so I was unscrewing the 4 while it was still on the arm, and then I was like, oh, wait a minute, I have to support this weight. And so I just started freaking out. So
yeah, it was pretty funny. But next week we have a feedback episode. So first of all, if you're listening, you have feedback, get it in, because when the show airs, we aren't far from recording it. So get it in right away. You can do that on the website. You can also do it in the forums. But get us your feedback, and we will do an extended coverage of Stephen's new display and this new MacBook Neo next week. I suspect a lot of the Mac Power Users audience is Neo curious, but not going to buy one, because I think a lot of our listeners want something a little more powerful.
For sure, but for friends and family, it's an interesting device to recommend to others. And a lot of people have pushed it to its limits, like Tyler Stallman on YouTube, and it's very capable, even though it is only 8 gigs of memory. So we'll talk about it.
Yeah, but Apple Silicon is what makes this possible. And I don't know about you, but I've had so many people in the regular world who know that I do stuff with Apple approach me in the last week saying, hey, I'm thinking about getting one of those new computers. What do you think? I mean, a lot of people are suddenly thinking about getting a new Mac with that MacBook Neo pricing.
And I think a lot of people were waiting for an update to the MacBook Air line as well, which they received. And so an M5 MacBook Air is a great option for a lot of people too.
Yeah, and that's something I'm looking forward to talking about in feedback. It's where is the line on recommendations? Because a lot of people in our audience are the people who recommend. It's where do you push somebody to a MacBook Air versus a Neo? We're going to work on that and get real answers for you next week. But that'll be fun. So congratulations on your new hardware, Stephen.
Thank you.
I have something new too. I released a new field guide. Robot Assistant Field Guide is now live. You can get it. We'll talk about it in today's show, but the focus of today's show is really going to be on the kind of the journey I had in setting this up and kind of learning how to build my robot. And gang, it's for real. I mean, AI is now useful. And if you want to go down this road, it's pretty impressive. Today on More Power Users, we're going to talk even more about that AI stuff and where it becomes practical as well. So we got an AI-heavy show for you. We're going to have those occasionally. It's something we want to cover, but it's obviously not the only thing we're going to cover here on the Mac Power Users.
It's an interesting time with AI, too, because there's so much competition. Yeah. There was a long time where ChatGPT felt like it was in the lead and it was pervasive. And then around the turn of the year, Gemini, everybody seemed to be saying, oh, no, Gemini's better. And then Claude Cowork recently has kind of taken over as that's really an assistant. And I might even talk about Perplexity Computer a little later in this episode. So it's really exciting time because it feels like there's a lot of innovation that's happening fast, but it is also useful, as you're going to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to take advantage of this stuff, I'm going to talk in the show about what I've got it doing for me, but someone like me who's a creator, and there's a lot of what I call donkey work in my life, things that are admin details. And if that's you, this is an episode for you because, this stuff is now becoming a solved problem. It's amazing. But let's step back. We're talking about AI. We've heard a lot of promises about AI over the last few years. Everybody keeps talking about how it's going to solve global warming and cure cancer and do all this great stuff for us. But then, as users, we go into something like ChatGPT, and you can tell it to make your text sound like a pirate, or something like that. But it isn't really that useful because you're locked into that chat window. Even if it does work that's useful to you, you still have to, at the end of the day, copy and paste into the chat window. And the whole thing feels kind of tedious to me. So I wasn't really that impressed with it. But, being a co-host of Mac Power Users means that you bring interesting technology to the audience that they can use. So I'm always been testing it. I've spent so much money because I have subscriptions to Gemini and Claude and ChatGPT. Every month I'm looking at what's new and banging against it, trying to figure out what works. And something interesting that happened to me is, I got a lot of knowledge through this process about how it works. And, the two big problems we face with this stuff is memory and access. These LLMs, large language models, which is what these all are, these frontier models, are not very good at remembering things. So you'll get in a conversation about trying to do something, and it'll forget something it said earlier, and it'll go off on a tangent. That's what leads to a whole bunch of problems. And they're getting better at that, and the memory window gets bigger and bigger over time. That helps. And then the other problem is that it's access. It just cannot get access to the apps it needs to do the work. So it forgets, and it doesn't really have the ability to go somewhere. But things are now changing.
And it's actually interesting. My other co-host, Jason, he uses ChatGPT a lot. He's a writer primarily. And ChatGPT just kept doing responses that were, he didn't want it to do it. And so he would tell ChatGPT, never respond like this. Like, never say this in any of your suggestions you give me. Yeah. And guess what? It would just keep doing it. And so I shared with him, well, you can create a custom GPT, and that will kind of hard code those instructions into your requests.
Yeah.
And he did that, and it got better, but it's still not perfect, which is wild that even then, when it supposedly has instructions, it still hallucinates and does things it don't want to. But that's kind of what part of your system you've built too, is kind of that hard coding instructions so you don't have that monotonous entry of the same instruction over and over.
Yeah, Jason needs to build a robot assistant. And the thing I say in the course, it's like having an employee who's very good at reading the manual and following instructions, but also has amnesia. So he'll read the manual, and then a couple hours later, you'll say, hey, can you do that email process? He's like, what email process? What are you talking about? And so you have to constantly tell him to read the manual. And the robot assistant thing I'm doing is where you basically build the manual. And the robot knows to read the manual, so it just goes off and reads the manual every time. So 2 hours later, you say, what about that? Do that email thing. And it says, oh, yeah, remember, there's something about an email thing. I'll go read the manual, and then I'll do it. And that's the difference, because that solves the amnesia problem. And the reasons that's possible now is because things are changing with the two root problems of access and memory. There's a couple things that have been happening. OpenClaw became a big deal. I did a video on it. The first public video I did in like a year, it got like 80,000 views, Stephen. I feel like a YouTuber now.
That's pretty good. That's more than most of mine, yeah.
Yeah, I was surprised. But OpenClaw was a system where you'd get like a Mac Mini, and you would build the system, and it would try to remember, and it would run independently. And that's the big selling point, is like it runs while you're asleep. So I had got it trained up to the point where it could like get a customer support email and reset a password. And I'd wake up from bed and it'd say, hey, I reset a customer password for you while you're asleep. Great, But the security risk to that is substantial. Like, I think it's a terrible idea for anybody to put anything on there. Like the idea of having access to your email. If somebody convinces it that they're you, let's say you're asleep and somebody on the other side of the world bangs against your internet connection, convinces it's you, and tells it to reset all your bank passwords, and takes all your money while you're asleep, that's a possibility with OpenClaw. So it's very dangerous. But at the same time, Anthropic's Claude was doing something very similar but more controlled, where OpenClaw is what I'd call an independent agent. Anthropic is making a controlled agent or a managed agent. And And that started with Claude Cowork. So Claude Cowork is a code system that Anthropic made to help programmers make better programs. It's really powerful. In fact, did you make your app with Claude Code?
Well, my app that I did, like I vibe coded for a while, was mostly ChatGPT because that one was integrated into Xcode first.
Yeah.
And then I finished it up a little bit with Claude.
Yeah.
But Claude Cowork, that helped me cross the divide because Claude Code, which basically runs in the terminal of your Mac, I did install that on a Mac and I tried using it for a while. I am not as comfortable in terminal as others. I'm getting better at it. But if you're listening and watching and anything in the terminal is a little bit intimidating like it is for me, Claude Cowork was the first time that it kind of brought it into the Claude Mac app UI, where Cowork was a chatbot like all the other things. And it was very easy for me to understand, like, here are connectors, where I can tell it, connect to my Notion account or connect to my Slack account, and then Cowork can do things from the Claude Mac app, and you never have to deal with terminal when it comes to Claude Cowork, at least in my use cases. And so that actually started me on the road to be like, okay, let me see where I can use this and implement it in my workflows.
Yeah, and as I say, I realized I misspoke earlier. Claude Code is the thing I was talking about. So Claude Code is where programmers can make programs. But what they discovered was that a lot of programmers were using Claude Code to be productive, and they were using terminal commands to set calendar events and do all, because you can do virtually anything on a Mac with the terminal.
Right.
And they said, oh, wait a second, we got a product here. So then they used Claude Code to generate another layer of abstraction above it, which is Claude Cowork. And Claude Cowork doesn't require you to go into terminal, although behind the scenes, it's doing a lot of terminal stuff. You just don't see it, So Claude went from a chat bot to a programming tool to Claude Cowork. And what makes it so valuable is the harnessing that they put around it. The ability to say, okay, when you start up Claude Cowork, it says, okay, I'm ready to work. What do you want? And the first thing it asks you is attach me to something, and the default is a folder. So attach me to a folder. So I talked earlier about the problem with memory. Well, AI forgets things. What if you had a folder full of markdown files that had all the instruction manuals for you and an index that it could read? So it knows what all the manuals are. And so the amnesiac employee can say, okay, I need to do a thing with email. That's written down, and I know it's written down, so I'll go read it before I go do it. And then the memory problem gets solved. So that's the big unlock. When you use Claude Cowork, you attach it to a folder full of text files, and you put all your instructions there, and it never forgets them because it always knows they're there. You start it up. The first command I always give it is, hey, read the index. Look at what's in this file I just gave you and have a working knowledge of what's there at all times. And as soon as you do that, it's got memory. It solves Jason's problem, and it will follow them every time. So that's the first big unlock. The second unlock is Anthropic made a system called Model Context Protocol, MCP, and that's the idea that a third-party application can share data with Claude Cowork. So they can exchange data. And you have a lot of control as a user, like you say, I only read data, or I can read and write data. Just as we're recording this, Fantastical, a very popular calendar app with our audience, released their MCP. So now when you're in Claude Cowork, not only does it read those text files you've given it, it also has the ability to know what's on your calendar because you've connected the MCP to Fantastical. And app developers are jumping on this. So suddenly you've got memory plus access, and AI gets really interesting if you want to be productive.
Yeah, and I will say I'm going to share my screen just to show everyone kind of Claude Cowork real quick, because this helped me realize, like, you can sandbox it basically. And like David was saying, if you're in the Claude Mac app, just the regular app you download from Claude.ai, and you go to that Cowork tab, you have the chatbot, and then you can select a folder, let's say your desktop or your downloads folder, and then whatever you do, you can choose to allow, always allow, and then whatever prompt you give it, Claude Cowork is just going to work in that folder. So if you wanted to do an experiment, like one of the first things I did in a video was tell people, point Claude Cowork at a folder and just tell it to rename all the files based on the file content, it can do that, and you can be confident it's not going to go off and go into other files and folders on your Mac that you don't want it to. And so while you could do that in terminal with Claude Code, the Cowork, at least for me personally, helped me visually distinguish, okay, Claude is going to go and work in my desktop folder and nowhere else, and I don't have to worry about it. And in the same way, when you go to the settings for Claude and to the connectors, this is where, like David was saying, with a MCP server, there's a lot of first-party connectors that you can just connect to Notion, Slack, things like that. You can even add custom MCPs, which we might get into later. But you can also configure the MCPs, which this, again, helped me have some more trust in Cowork, because you can tell it, I want you to always have read access, but not write access. So if you want it to be able to read your Notion and be able to ask it questions about what Notion page is this topic, or get me the Notion page of this episode of Mac Power Users, you can give it read access and or write access and granularly control what it has access to do. And again, while this might have been possible with Claude Code, for me, this visual distinction that is unique to Cowork really helped me have the confidence to then give it access to some things and start doing some stuff.
Yeah, I mean, another app that we talk about on the show is Drafts, and Drafts has MCP connections, and I'll get into later in the show what I'm doing with it, but the fact is the developer of Drafts has been very thorough, and you have very granular control over what gets written and what gets read. And you start developing these. The other big piece of this is they added Chrome support. Claude built its own MCP for Google Chrome. So it can drive a web browser, which suddenly unlocks a whole nother set of things that you can do with it. It's really powerful. And so you combine put all this together. So you've got a folder full of text files. You've got access to third-party applications. You've got a LLM brain that's smart enough to do what I call donkey work, the stuff that we're talking about during the show. And you've got a real live robot assistant. And it's not that hard to put it together. I mean, another piece of this that's interesting to me is that it doesn't involve coding. Like you talked earlier about renaming files. This has been a white whale of my whole teaching life. I have been trying to teach people how to rename files for 20 years. And I have over the years explained how to write a regular expression to go and pull data out of a file and try and rename it with a regular expression. That went over really terribly because people don't want to write regular expressions. We've done things where it encoded the OCR and then went in and tried to yank it out, but didn't get the wrong date. What you just talked about is a solving of that problem that has never existed, where you use the power of an LLM. And the way I do that one is I say, read the first page, whatever the PDF is, just read the first page and find out what the date is of the document. You get a bill from the insurance company 3 weeks ago and you scan it today. Historically, the date is probably going to be the date you scanned it. It's not going to be the date of the bill. Now, it's not. It's every time it's the date of the bill because it reads the first page and then it can categorize it, name it, and it does it for 10 documents or it does it for 1,000 documents. There's a labs member and she's dealing with something in her life where suddenly she's got a bunch of documents for a family member that need to be scanned, and she's like, I don't even know what to do. And I said, you are so lucky that you waited until this moment, because now it is very easy. Set up a robot, teach it how to rename, and then give it 1,000 documents and go make tea, because that's really as easy as it is now. But I really think that, this stuff is game changing for people who are interested in automation at a level that I've never seen before.
Yeah, and for someone who might follow my content with shortcuts, you might think, well, renaming files, Shortcuts does that too. And yes, it can, but to show you, this is a shortcut that I built to rename files. It requires Apple Intelligence, which was a recent addition with macOS 26. But a shortcut that's required to actually rename files based on their content requires multiple prompts, multiple if statements, depending on the kind of document. If it's an audio file, it has to transcribe it first. And so if you wanted a shortcut that renamed every single file type with every kind of content, it would be a really long shortcut, and even then might not be reliable. And there have been times when I've tried to run a shortcut on a large number of files where it will fail in the middle. just because it's not great at running for a long time. This is,
Yeah.
again, an advantage of something like Cowork because the instruction can be much simpler. You don't need a bunch of if statements and custom prompts for different file types, and it can run for a long time, and the cost might be tokens, depending on your plan for Anthropic, but it's not going to fail in the middle of renaming hundreds of files in a folder.
Yeah, it's just so reliable. And so the way all this works, gang, is you get a Claude account with Cowork access, and I think that even the free account has it now, but it's probably not going to be enough if you're doing a lot of work. Most likely you're going to need a $20 a month Claude account, a pro account. Then you attach it to a folder. Now, the folder, in my experience, the best way to do this is with Obsidian or NotePlan. Those are two applications we've covered a lot here on the show. And what makes them good is that it's a folder full of text files, and the application, Obsidian or NotePlan, will be the layer on top of it that lets you navigate them yourself. But you could also honestly just make a folder full of text files with no app on top of it. It would do the same thing. The robot doesn't care if you can have access to them through Obsidian or NotePlan. It just needs the text there. But text is the definite format you want, because text is so easy to read and write by the robot. It's going to be lightning fast. Like if you put all this stuff, like another MCP available to you with Cowork is Apple Notes. So you could put all the stuff in Apple Notes and have the manuals there if you wanted. But the process of hitting Apple Notes, going through the MCP layer, figuring out what's there, pulling out the data, putting it back into Claude, that is going to be much slower than if you just use text. And I believe in the future that may not be we may not need this text layer, but now we do. And so I'd recommend, polish off your Obsidian or your NotePlan chops and set up a folder full of text files. So that's the first thing you need. Second thing you need is app control via MCP, which you get once you install the application. And you just go into the application, under connections, under the settings, and you pick the ones you want. And there's even third-party ones out there, like Stephen mentioned. You can go and get them. I'm not going to recommend that in this show because you don't know who's making those, and we want to keep you secure here. So I recommend first-party MCPs, if at all possible. If you really want to go out in the fringe there and use an MCP developed by somebody else, make sure that it's on open source, that it has a lot of people behind it, and that it's relatively safe. But I generally recommend the ones that go through Claude, because Anthropic doesn't just let anybody put an MCP in their store. You've got to go through a process with them. I think that's probably the safest way to do. But you set up, you get Claude, your folder full of text, you get your MCPs, and then you get to work.
And I'll say I was in the Bear Notes camp. And spoiler, I still am. But
sure.
I did try to export all those notes as Markdown files. I did that, put it in a folder. I was able to create an Obsidian vault, and I could have done that. I just haven't brought myself to switch over to Obsidian just yet, but it is possible to do it. There are MCPs, like David was saying, custom MCPs to connect Bear, also to connect email like Fastmail, but those are made by third party, not Anthropic, not by Fastmail or Bear, the developers themselves. So I have not installed those just yet because I don't know those people, and I've not heard enough reports to know if I should be confident in that. So I'm going to wait personally, and hopefully Bear or Anthropic builds an MCP that's like first party that I can use, maybe Fastmail as well. But if you wanted to go the Apple Notes route, you can do that. It's just slower. But yeah, the raw text files is the way to go.
Yeah, and I know there's people in the audience that love, Obsidian's very polarizing. People love it and people hate it. And I kind of understand both sympathies, in a lot of ways. But I think that if you're not in Obsidian, I would recommend going with NotePlan. NotePlan, we did a full episode on it like a couple of years ago. It's made by a single developer who's fully dedicated to that application. And it is perfect for this because it is also stores its data in a folder full of Markdown files. So you just point the robot at the NotePlan Markdown files, and off you go. You can go either way. So I recommend you do one of those things. But I want to get into what I'm doing with this thing. So let's get there. Okay, so I've told you the mechanics of my robot. Now let me tell you some of the things I'm doing with it. We talked about file renaming, but I didn't really get into it in real depth. So I have built custom instruction sets for file renaming, And the robot not only knows how to rename files, it knows the storage folder hierarchy that I have for where things get stored. So it doesn't just take a guess at how to store things. It has indexed the storage system. And what it does then is it looks at the file, it renames it, it categorizes it at the moment it renames it, and then it gives me a list of places it's going to send them. And I say, okay, items 1 through 7, correct. Item 8, you picked the wrong one. This is the right one. This is why. Oh, it says, okay, well, I'll put number 8. Now I say, update your memory or update your manual. So the next time you see something like item 8, you put it in the right one. It says, okay, I just did that. So it's constantly refining its ability to store files. So this file naming and storage problem gets really efficient. And once you kind of spend some time with it, the way I recommend you do it is do 10 and then do 50, get it tuned. And then you just start throwing documents at it and it gets it right every time.
Now, for folder wise though, have you given it access to all folders on your Mac?
No. What I do is I run it. So I have document storage folders in my Mac, one for personal stuff and one for MacSparky. And I explain this in the course. There's a video on it. But in the folders where those are stored, I have a custom instruction set for the robot in those folders. So when it goes to that folder, I say, okay, now read your instructions for this folder. And it's at the root level of that storage folder.
Gotcha.
And it knows the hierarchy of that folder. And so it has access to all the stuff in storage there. But at the same time, security-wise, it's not a problem because I'm managing it. All it's doing is sorting and filing documents. I'm not telling it to read everything there. I'm just telling it read the folder hierarchy, and it's managed. So I'm literally watching it while it happens. So yeah, it's there. And then when I'm done, I disconnect it, and then it doesn't have access anymore. So that's the big difference between OpenClaw and
Cowork.
And Cowork is it's managed versus independent AI, and it makes a huge difference because it gives you the power to do this. I mean, people who are using OpenClaw are telling me, "Oh, I'm using it, but I'm not giving it any authority, so I'm safe." I'm like, "But then, what's the point of having it?" You know?
Yeah, it's too. And I installed OpenClaw on a review unit MacBook Pro where I had none of my accounts logged in.
Yeah,
and it was I think it's more difficult to use than Cowork.
yeah,
just from a user interface, how you actually get it to do things perspective. And like you mentioned at the beginning of the show, I was nervous about prompt injection, meaning if it could see all my emails and somehow I get a phishing or some kind of email that can trick OpenClaw into doing something on my Mac, which has access to passwords and all that kind of stuff. And to have it sandboxed on a Mac that doesn't have your information, these tools become way less useful because it can't actually take action on your stuff, your work.
Yeah, exactly. So I've got the file renaming thing wired down more than I've ever had it in my life. If you're a DevonThink user, DevonThink has built this stuff in so you can use your own Claude account to do it within the application, but you can also do it independently. The next piece of it for me is just taking on donkey work, and I've been writing emails about this if you're on my newsletter subscription, but donkey work for me is the kind of stuff that blocks me. There's all kinds of stuff as you work through the day that is not actually the stuff you're getting paid to do, the creative work. Somebody writes and wants a password reset, or you need to send out a sponsor invoice, or just stuff like all that stuff. I always dread doing those things because whenever I do it, it forces me to stop doing the creative work of actually coming up with ideas for shows and outlining and working on the shows or making videos. And every time I do it, it's very hard for me to get back in rhythm with the actual creative work. It's a huge focus block, And so, I've looked at options. Do I hire somebody? Do I, do this? And this is really the best solution for me because it just kind of does those kinds of things. So I think about all the donkey work in my life and I start thinking about, well, how can I get this off to the robot? We talked about the Fantastical connector. So now I've got the ability, when I start the day, it just tells me what's on the calendar for the next day and the few days afterwards. I did a thing, Daisy and I joined Pilates, I'm trying to lose weight. Nice. And they sent me, I went on their website and did some updates, and then there was a page there that just showed me all my upcoming appointments for the next 2 weeks. but they didn't have a link to add to calendar. I don't know, it's like a small company and whatever. So I literally just took a screenshot of it and I gave it to the robot and said, add these to my calendar. And it did. It just read the screenshot. It was a PNG. It created calendar events with the MCP. So the robot read that, sent it down. It has a skill. It understands how to create events for me. I've saved that as an Obsidian document, and off it goes. So it's like having an assistant, doing stuff like that. Tasks, I'm doing something really out on the limb right now, is I have taken all my task data and just sent it into Obsidian as separate records. And I had it create a base for me. And I've been working with it to come up with a better task system for me. And I've invented something, Stephen. I call it my task pull system, because I don't want tasks forced on me. But it knows like my roles, it knows what's important to me, and every day it offers up so many tasks, and it knows the ones that like are date sensitive and things like that. So it gives me a list and I can write them down and work from there. But I've built a whole task system with it. And to a certain extent, it's like I've made an app, but it's just a personal app for me, the way I want to manage tasks. And I don't know if I'll be using this forever, but as I go through this course and teach it, I'm definitely going to be all in with this stuff. And it's kind of great in a lot of ways, I've had several people that, because I gave early access to this field guide to the labs members, and several labs members have already gone all in with it, and they're really happy with it too. So it manages that stuff. And so that's kind of a personal management thing, where when I get to the morning, I say, okay, what's up today? When I get to the end of the day and I want to do my shutdown routine, like what do I need to shut down to end the day? It does that for me. It's got access to my email. The way I've given it access to the email is it can read it, but it cannot write or send it for me. So I've keyed in the MCP. And I don't really want it writing emails for me, except for very narrow exceptions. Like I get sponsors on the blog, and I just, like 2 or 3 weeks before they sponsor them, I always need to send them an email. Hey, your sponsorship coming up, what links and what things, and I always forget to do that. It's just me, but my robot knows that that's an important thing. So when I run the shutdown routine now, it looks to my upcoming sponsorships, and anything within 3 weeks that hasn't been emailed, it generates and sends them an email asking them to send me assets. It's just, it's like having a little assistant,
Well, and this is, as people think, should I try this or what should I do? Like with when I build shortcuts, if there's any task that you do repeatedly, anything that is monotonous, anything that, if it's adding a calendar event, if it's adding a task every week, like try and see if you can offload it. Because as you said, it's like building little apps. Like you said, your task management thing. That's what this is. It's building little apps or little processes for yourself that can take care of the busy work. And that's why even on like the last episode when I talked about that little script that resizes the Gling window every time I open it, it is such a simple thing. And like, well, why even do it? Well, because before that, I was manually resizing that window every time I open the app. And if there's like one task that I do all the time that I could then offload to some automation or some AI tool to then do it for me, it's going to save me minutes and then hours of time in the future, times all the little tasks that you can automate, like creating a new folder for every new episode of Mac Power Users on my Mac. I have an automation that I have it doing for that as well.
Yeah, another thing, and maybe this is me being a former lawyer, but I'm obsessive about logging things, right? When I buy something, I try to log the email, and I've written scripts in the past that, copy a magic link to the email message, and then I have a notes document or a document somewhere that I can write down to keep track of the transaction. Or like when dealing with sponsors and somebody does a booking, I want to log that they booked it and what day, and I can get back to the source email if I need to. And all that stuff was just a time crunch on me because I had to do that manually. That's not something you can really just hire somebody to do for you. Hey, read all my email and create a log for me. I don't really want somebody to read all my email. But the robot can do that. And it does it better than I do it because I just say, read all my email that I have, put a flag of robot on or a label or a tag, whatever, and it'll read it and say, okay, I see that you've tagged one for a shirt you bought. Great. Okay. Make a, log it. And so it'll create a record for that vendor. It'll write it down. Another one is Mac Power Users expenses. Like Stephen and I split the expenses for the show, and occasionally receipts come in, and it's hard for me to keep track of all that stuff. So I said, oh, log that expense for Mac Power Users expense. And it says, okay, would you like me to make a spreadsheet too? Why, yes, robot, I would like you to make a spreadsheet. So now, Stephen, when it comes time for us to settle up, you're going to get a very nicely formatted spreadsheet, and you're going to go, man, Sparky's really got it together. And the fact is, I didn't do any of it. The robot did all this for me. And, so it's really good at logging things. And it for me, it grabs the link to the email, whether using Fastmail or Google or Gmail, you can do that because there's a URL link for every email. So when it logs it, it also grabs the link to it. So I can literally just push a button in Obsidian and go straight to that email. And it's just really powerful for things like that. Back in the days of being a lawyer, this is the kind of thing I really needed when I was running a bunch of litigation cases, to be able to log things like this. So that's another thing it does for me. Another piece of that is when I run the shutdown, it reads all my outgoing email for the last 48 hours and looks for anything in there that should have been logged. And says, oh, I see you sent an email to this person, and blah, blah, blah. And over time, it's got to the point where it just knows now which ones should get logged and which ones doesn't. And
that's wild.
And it's so at the end of the day, it just logs all my outgoing email for me. I don't think about it now when I send email, but at the end of the day, it gets handled for me.
Now, real quick, you mentioned every email has a link to that email. Are you using, I've always wanted to try and get the links reliably. Is that in the Apple Mail Mac app that you're getting the links, or how is that being pulled?
So you can do it in Apple Mail, and I have written Apple scripts to do that, where you can, and I'll send you the link for it, because there's a method to do that out of Apple Mail, but I'm not using that with this new system. I used Fastmail, which has a web link, so long as you're logged into your Fastmail account, which gets you to an account, gets you to an email. That's the most reliable way to do it with the robot, because the robot can't go into Apple Mail and hit, the magic Apple script. I guess it probably could if I taught it, but there's no MCP to Apple Mail. I didn't really want it to make it more complicated than it needed to be. And the Fastmail links are 100% reliable.
That's happening though in Chrome with the Claude agent?
No, it reads I was using the verboten Fastmail MCP. And so I was reading it through there. It gets the address when it reads the mail, and then there's a way to interpolate the address into a link, and it does that.
So is that Fastmail MCP? That's not first party. That's someone made.
No, it's not. Which I realized was a risk, and I was nervous about it. So ultimately, I switched over to Gmail. I didn't really want to say that, but I did.
Okay. So, wait
Called
a minute.
me out, man. I don't want to get in that today.
Okay.
I don't got time. We can talk about it in the future. But
okay, very good.
Gmail has a Gmail authorized MCP, and I realized that I was taking a big risk with my email. Even though Fastmail is generally safer and more secure than Gmail when it comes to MCPs, right. Gmail's more safe and secure because it's an actual Gmail MCP. So I switched over. That was a big switch for me, but the robot has become such a part of my operations that it made total sense.
Right, it was worth it.
Yeah. Okay. So my shame has been disclosed.
Sorry.
Stephen got it.
I wasn't trying to call you out. I was just trying to figure out how to do the URL thing for me.
Yeah. No, you can do it, but for Fastmail you need an MCP. I've heard from some people saying that one's safe. It's got like a bunch of people working on it, but it's my email, and I just didn't. It's just too risky. Yeah.
Right. And that's one of the things that's prevented me from going all in with the email stuff, is because I use Fastmail by default. But maybe I'll teach it the scripting thing, and we can come back and maybe see, Cowork can use the script to get the links and do that, because that's always been annoying. Even with shortcuts, there's not a great way to pull a message URL.
All right. First of all, everybody who wants to make fun of me for going back to Gmail, go ahead. Let me have it. I deserve it.
Is this going to be a thing?
Definitely. We can talk about it in the next feedback episode next week, but I'll just say this. I've got a safe MCP, and it's kind of nice being back in Superhuman. So there we go. I'll just leave it at that.
See? Okay.
All right. Let's move on, though. All right. So that's kind of the manual stuff, right?
Okay.
The other things it does for me is a lot of production, management. First of all, when I make a labs video for my MacSparky Labs members, making the video is fun, right? But the part of distributing it is a pain. And so when I make a video, it has to go to the memberful site, which is where the members get it. But they also, some members want to read it on the website. So we have a special thing at the WordPress site. And then the people that Jim, who helps like proofread stuff, needs to check the text to make sure I didn't embarrass myself again with something I wrote. And so he gets a Notion record to tell him to go check it. So that's 3 different websites basically I have to go to get something published. And I built a skill out with my robot, and it does all of that, using a combination of Chrome and the Notion MCP and all the other bag of tricks it has. But once it's got the text of the post, the title of the post, the YouTube link, and the various assets it needs, it just goes off and it creates a WordPress post, and it puts a Notion record, and it goes to Memberful and sets up the public post. It does all that stuff, and I don't touch any of it. So I'm still working on important things while that's happening. And I've got a bunch of different versions of that skill, like that does a public blog post and helps me with the newsletter. And like a lot of the kind of production distribution pieces that are absolute donkey work for me are now all handled by this robot.
So let me ask, because I do a lot of donkey work for like publishing an episode or a video.
Yeah.
Like one thing I do is I share new episodes of Primary Tech to a Circle community, and I upload video to Spotify. Is it trustworthy enough, as in reliable enough, to use the Chrome with the Claude Agentic plugin to do a lot of clicking on a website, like on the Spotify creators website, to click episodes, click the latest episode, click upload video? You find it to be accurate and consistent, and even doing things like that, navigating the web?
The first 3 or 4 times you run it, you're going to have to manage it and make sure it got it right. And once it figures it out, once it builds the manual, it's perfect. I mean, a good example for me is I use FreshBooks to invoice sponsors. And that website, when you create a new invoice, is tedious. Like you have to get into the exact field to put the terms, and you have to make sure you check the box to send the PDF with the invoice. And like there's a bunch of little, just really tedious things you have to do. And it has mastered that so well now that when I do my weekly sponsor kind of block, it just says, oh, there's these 3 sponsors that you've already run and you haven't invoiced yet. I say, great, invoice them. And the invoices get sent, and I don't touch it anymore. The first few weeks I was doing that, it took some managing. It's like training a new employee. You got to get it just right. But I think you'll find that those kinds of things you can do. There's a couple pieces of it I haven't gone at yet. I have not gone at like uploading a video to YouTube. I do that myself.
Yeah.
But like going in, I could probably make adjustments to videos with the metadata and stuff with it. So there's some pieces of it. Another piece of it for me that I haven't like licked yet is putting an image in a WordPress post. It tries to do it for me, but it doesn't get it right. And like I'm very particular. Like I'm feeling like this one goes on the right and it flows with the text. And this one, I don't have a uniform system for images. Like it just depends how I'm feeling. And that's hard to teach a robot to do because it doesn't understand feelings.
Intuition. It doesn't have intuition.
So I actually do the photo upload to an image myself, and there's a couple little pieces of it, but the vast majority of this production kind of pipeline stuff is now handled by the robot for me.
Okay, and when you're training it, so let's say you install the plugin in Chrome, it's literally taking control of the browser.
Yeah.
When you see it do something it's not supposed to, do you stop it and then talk to it?
Yes.
Or do you correct it afterwards? Like, how does that process look?
I usually, if I'm watching it, I'll stop it midstream and say, okay, you just clicked this box. I don't want you to ever click that box again.
Okay. Okay.
And it's like, okay, boss, I won't do that. I say, and then you say the magic word, update your skill.
Okay.
Because when I was first training it, I would tell it it's doing things wrong. And then I'd say at the end, okay, so the next time I ask you, will you click that box that I told you to never click again? It'll say, absolutely, I'll forget this. And then I'd say, great. So now rewrite your skill file to make sure you never click that box again. And then it does that. And then it absolutely will never click that box again.
And the skill files, those live in your Obsidian vault?
Yes.
Or okay.
Yes. That's one of the tricks of this is Claude has a skills system where they want you to upload skills to it. But it can't rewrite its own skills. It's something, I guess the robot can't program itself kind of thing. I don't know. But so it'll say, okay, I can fix that, but then you have to re-upload the new version. And I did that when I was first learning this stuff. But I realized, that doesn't make sense. I told it, look, ignore your internal skill system. Your skills are in Obsidian. This is where you look all the time. And I walk you through all this in the course, how to set it up. But I say, no, Obsidian is your source of truth. And then when we're working on things, I say, update it. It updates it. It's constantly updating these skills. And now I've been doing it a few months. The skills are not updating as much, because now things are kind of locking in. And now I'm kind of expanding on it. It's like, okay, now let's see if we can lick this photo thing in WordPress, or, so I'm refining it. But at the beginning, you're constantly rewriting those skill files.
And when it updates a skill, how you have it set up, like it's literally the text file in your Finder on your Mac. Yeah. It is writing stuff to that text file in the background by itself.
Yes, and if you can read it. It's not programming code. It's just a plain text file saying, this is the step of sending a FreshBooks invoice. First, click on the vendor name, and then check the Obsidian record for, the date that the thing ran. Then go on the website and find the URL for the ad that he posted so we can put it in the invoice. And it just has a list of things it goes through. And I've got like 80 of these built now on all sorts of crazy stuff that I do. And every day I seem to add a few more because I find more things for it to do for me.
Do you think, let me ask you, because this is personal, but I think this might apply to a lot of listeners and viewers. If I wanted to start using Claude Cowork and train it with these skills and have skill files, but I'm not ready to jump to Obsidian for all of my notes, could I create a folder in my Mac somewhere that just has the skill files and then tell Claude Cowork, here's all your skills, but that's not and it can always write there and it'll just be the skill folder and that's separate from my notes and everything?
Absolutely.
Okay.
That's all it's really doing is looking at the Obsidian markdown files. It's not...
Right.
It doesn't need Obsidian to do anything. The Obsidian is a convenience for me to be able to read them, move them, work with them.
Okay.
And that's the same reason why NotePlan could work too, because it's just... But you could, like I said at the beginning, just make a text file database, just a folder full of text files and call it your Cowork skills file. Yeah. Another key part of this, you need to make an index. And this is another thing I kind of explained deeper in the course, but the index is the thing that it's constantly reading. The index is a list of all your skills. It's like the table of contents to all your manuals. And you say, always keep the table of contents in your memory, because when I ask you to do something, you need to know that you have an existing skill to do that. One of the things I made during the course, that I left in the course, was at one point it forgot. I had to do so much that it forgot its index. So when it finished and I said, update your skill, it created a new skill because I didn't realize it already had one, and I left that in because I want people to see kind of that vector of mistake that you can make. But you want it to understand that it's got this number of skills and this is how they fit together. And when you ask it to do something, run whatever I just asked it against that index and then go find the manual and do the work.
Gotcha.
Another thing that it's done for me is customer support. I like emails from customers. I hate the customer backend stuff that is involved. When somebody says, hey, I forgot my password, going in and resetting the password, there's just a million little kinds of problems. And it's really good at doing that for me now. It goes back and figures it out, and it solves the problem, but it doesn't write them. I actually am the one who writes them back. But if I wanted to, I could have it write. But if somebody's giving me money, I'm not going to have a robot write them. So, it goes through and does stuff like that. Publishing workflows. Another thing it does for me is the post-production workflows. I am terrible at taking down edit notes when we record podcasts. Stephen Robles has already learned that. Stephen Hackett knew it well. But I get into the show and I just lose track. And when little things happen, I just don't... Me stopping to write something down is going to ruin the flow for me because my brain is not that complex. But this has been a solved problem with my robot. When we finish a show, I just give it the transcript and say, find all the edit points, find all the links. If people have noticed that the links are getting better with Mac Power users, it's partly because the robot is finding them for me. I don't have to go spend an hour, finding them all. So it does that for me. And
that was really impressive. When we did one of our first episodes about the menu bar apps, you had put something in the Notion. Actually, it was probably a robot, and it was so many links to the apps, and I was like, how did he... this must have taken a long time is what I initially thought, because I thought you pulled all the links to the apps you mentioned.
Now
and
you
told me the robot pulled them all. I was like, Okay, that's immediately useful because otherwise I would like be Googling an app, getting the link, or going to the
Yeah.
App Store, and it even pulled like an App Store link for an app that you get in the App Store. It pulled the website for apps that you would get from a developer's website. So that was impressive.
Yeah. It has been really impressive for me. And this thing turned AI from a curiosity to me to a working coworker. And I run it so much. I mean, I actually pulled the extra monitor out of mothballs. We talked about this in last week's More Power Users, and I hung it on the right side. And now I've got Claude and Chrome and the MCP stuff going on over there, so I can just keep an eye on it while it's doing stuff for me throughout the day.
Yeah, I have some questions maybe at the end of this episode because I'm curious your thoughts about lock-in and what happens in the future. But we'll get to that in a bit.
So Stephen, I feel like this whole system is creating a kind of a pivot point for me, and I think for a lot of people in how we use computers. And I want to acknowledge that because I think this is something that affects the future of Mac Power users and all of us as we use computers. It's like we are getting a new way to work with computers, which is, I hope I'm not being overly dramatic, but I feel like it's on the level of the graphic user interface. It's like, this is a new paradigm where your interface is the chat that you have with Cowork or something like Cowork, and the stuff behind it is all infrastructure that the computer kind of handles for you. Like, up until now, we've all been building systems of apps that we tie together in various ways and get our work done. But what if it's just like this virtual like robot assistant and you tell it what you want done and it does that stuff while you work on the hard stuff?
Yeah, I think back to what I can remember, like the internet. That was around for a while, and then there were use cases that would emerge, and the earliest ones being, messenger, email, message boards, things like that. That was my initial foray into the internet, message boards and things like that. But you carry that all the way through, and now the internet has allowed things like hailing a car from the Uber app or having groceries arrive at your door from Instacart. And it feels like large language models and AI, they've been really interesting tools. The chatbot has been the first kind of interface that we have used to interact with these models. And Cowork has felt like the next step into making this actually useful to automate to more people. While a chatbot is interesting and has been obviously very popular, ChatGPT was one of the fastest growing consumer products, maybe in history, I feel like, just adoption rate, the amount of people that started using the ChatGPT app. But like you said earlier, a chatbot is very limited as to what it can do. You can ask it a lot of things, it can tell you a lot of things, but they can't really do much else outside of that window. And this has felt like Claude Cowork, and even being in the shortcuts world for so long, it was a realization of, this is what a true large language model with access to your data in a safe way, what is possible. Makes me really hope that Apple moves fast on this, and maybe there will be a first-party solution similar to this. But B, that if you want to be ahead of the game and take advantage of these resources now, like Claude Cowork, that it really can change how productive you are, give you an advantage in the workplace, or if you run your own business, like David and I do, it can really multiply your efforts. Where if you can't or don't want to, hire an assistant, like an actual person or a virtual assistant, Claude Cowork really can be that assistant with the training, which is really impressive. Something that I don't think has been possible up till now.
Yeah, it is so. I'm so impressed with so the labs, the MacSparky labs, I give early access to field guides. So as we're recording this show, the course has just been released to the public, but it's been in the labs for a few weeks, and already, like, there's one guy who is a Red Cross volunteer and does a bunch of kind of heavy work for them, and he has offloaded so much of his donkey work for the Red Cross to his robot. And like I've got a teacher, and I've got like all these people writing in who are like, they've got their robots fully functional now. And this course is weird because I'm not teaching you how to master an app. I'm teaching you how to build your own app, in essence. So people have taken what I've taught and they've gone entirely different directions than I did because they don't have to post things to Memberful, but they have to do something else. And it's been fascinating to see. There are caveats, you're sending data to Anthropic. Like when it's reading that file or uploading something, and the LLM needs to know what's in it. It's like some people are using it now with their journaling, and I'm very hesitant on that. I don't really want to send my journals to Anthropic, but it's up to you. Everybody teaches on. In terms of like, is this something that's going to go away in the future? I'd say probably at some point there'll be another version of this that doesn't require text files or something like that. But I think right now learning this stuff is so important, and the skill files you build, the instructions to do your donkey work are going to move with you no matter what it is. If Apple makes the perfect thing, we just take the skill text files we wrote for Cowork and move them over to the Apple thing. It's actually, I think it's going to be very transferable technology as the models evolve. In fact, today as we record this, we just saw a news item that ChatGPT, OpenAI, has had an all-hands-on meeting, and they're like, hey guys, we got to start making things for productivity in business. They realize that Anthropic is eating their lunch, and they're going to be coming for this too now. So I just think there'll be a lot of competition for our robots, but the robot instruction set, the things we make to help us, I think will be very transferable. One of my early customers did it in Obsidian. He decided he didn't like Obsidian. He took it over to NotePlan, and he just gave the robot instruction, okay, now NotePlan's your source of truth. Go through, read all the skills that relate to Obsidian, change them to NotePlan. Like 5 minutes later, he was running in NotePlan. It's just, this stuff is really amazing. Now, on this point with Apple, I feel like they are at such an inflection point here. Like, Apple is so important to us. But these robots and this new way of computing that I think is going to be inevitably very big and very popular because it's so good, that is the next thing. And if Apple gets on board with it now, they could own it. And if they're too conservative and they decide, no, we're not gonna go very deep down this thing, I think it's a huge mistake because people are going to go wherever the stuff is available to them.
Having your computer use itself is an incredible paradigm shift. And that's what you're talking about. And ideally, Apple would make their own computers be able to use themselves in a way.
Yes.
And hopefully that's what comes in. And just as a side note, I got a Samsung Galaxy S26 Ultra to try, the phone.
Yeah.
And it actually has a feature that uses Gemini where this phone can use itself. And it's specific to apps, so it's like Starbucks, DoorDash, and one other. But I can literally tell it, order me a flat white from Starbucks at Thanodisassa and I-4 exit. And I can watch my phone use itself to do exactly that. Clicking the buttons in the app, going all the way to the checkout until it's ready for me to finalize it. And that's the idea of, I want my phone to use itself when I don't have to, or if it's a task I don't need to do myself. And the same thing here with my Mac and Claude Cowork doing things on its own without me having to babysit it.
And when you think about Apple, and their focus on privacy and the way they want to do onboard processing for AI stuff. And, one of the things I didn't say at the beginning is like, okay, we keep hearing about how AI is going to change the world. For the type of things I've been describing throughout the show, the donkey work of your life, you don't need the most powerful AI in the world. Like the local models are good enough to do this kind of work for you. So like we're at a juncture here where if Apple adds the harness to use the AI to let the Mac use itself privately on device, that is the perfect solution for so many of us that want this stuff. And Apple's got the ecosystem. They've got the developer relations to the extent they still have them to get the developers to tie into it with Apple's version of an MCP. And this thing just runs itself on your Mac. Like, then you could even have OpenCloud where it does answer your customer support problems in the middle of the night because it's okay. There's no internet connection in. There's no risk of someone breaking in. You have got something amazing here that Apple is in the perfect spot to capitalize on right now. And if they're not seriously looking and putting some of their trillions of dollars into making this happen, they are making a huge mistake, in my opinion.
Yeah, but I'm also thankful that tools like Claude Cowork work great on the Mac.
Yeah.
And the Mac is still the open platform where you can do that, and it's really up to your privacy and security tolerance level that you allow it to automate itself for as much as you want. And that is why I've landed on Claude Cowork for a lot of tasks, because it is that balance if I can give it the permissions that I want and not give it the permissions to other things, and it can be a little sandboxed according to my liking, and I can trust it for those specific tasks.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the good news is you've got this ability today. You just hook up Claude Cowork. And I think the security benefit risk between Claude Cowork and something like OpenClaw is asymmetrical. I mean, you can give Claude Cowork a ton of power and very little risk. Like I said, I've got it on a separate screen. I'm watching it happen in the background. And when I finish a session, I turn it off. It doesn't have access anymore. It's done. I mean, it's very, I think it's kind of the Goldilocks seat right now between Siri that can't really do anything and, OpenClaw, which could do a lot more, but is a lot riskier. I think this whole Cowork thing is the right spot. I would love for Apple to do this, but we don't need Apple to do this to benefit from it right now.
Yeah. And one other, this is not Claude, but just to mention it, people have different feelings about Perplexity. I'm not going to say definitely try them. There's been some weird privacy and security issues in the past. But Perplexity Computer is another take on this kind of agentic AI where you can now even get a Mac Mini dedicated to a Perplexity Computer instance and have it run some of these long-running tasks. It also has some connectors. It's interesting. I used it to build an RSS reader app. And Perplexity Computer could literally just build that, created a 3-pane RSS reader, and it functioned, and it's a web app, and you can share the link and other people can use it. So there's some interesting ideas there, but it goes back to what I said at the beginning. It's exciting because there's competition. Like these companies, namely Anthropic, Perplexity, Google with Gemini, and OpenAI, they're all pushing forward, trying to figure out how can this be the most useful to the most people, so hopefully they can pay for these services and they can be profitable. But it's exciting because I feel like that's where the most competition is right now, and that's why there's so much fast advancement here.
Yeah. Another thing that I did with mine is I have it create a web app for me too that's constantly refreshed. It's called My Dashboard. And it's HTML code that's stored in a Obsidian document. It's a text file on my computer. And Safari knows it's there. And Claude updates it 2 or 3 times a day. And it's a Safari browser tab that shows me my upcoming events, my active tasks, my active projects I'm working on. It's linking, so I can click on a link. It goes straight to the active document in Obsidian. It's got filters, so I can say, well, give me the ones related to my father role, and it just filters itself down to that. It's kind of like a little app in itself. And but this is the thing, I don't know anything about coding something this dynamic in HTML, but Cowork did it for me. It sits there. It knows a couple times a day to go update it. Anything I've checked off, so it's up to date. And it's crazy, man. We're living in a crazy time for this stuff.
And even something, don't think any task is too small. And just as an example, I can use Claude Cowork in the Chrome browser automatically, but when I publish subscriber audio to Apple Podcasts, there's no publish when ready option. You literally have to wait till the audio file finishes processing, refresh the page for minutes, if not tens of minutes, and then click the publish button in Apple Podcasts. And I was like, sometimes I forget because I started doing something else and I forget to click publish. And so I had a robot literally just say, refresh this page every 60 seconds. When that publish button turns purple, I want you to click it.
Yeah.
That's the whole instruction. And it's so simple, and it seems like, well, why even automate that? Well, one, it now prevents me from having to think about forgetting. I don't have to worry about did I remember to hit publish? Did I leave the office because I was running out the door for an errand or something?
Yeah.
The robot's going to watch it and click it for me. And 2, I don't have to think about it. Anything that can reduce that cognitive load, even if it's a small task or just a busy task, if you can reduce the cognitive load, now you can spend that in more creative places, more productive places. And so no task is too small.
Yeah, like when I send a newsletter out to Labs members or the public and I put a YouTube link in it, if you just go on YouTube when you upload, they shorten the link they give you when you copy it.
Right.
But when you put that in a newsletter, some email programs will say, well, there's a shortened link in here, so kick that one. We won't let that one in because that might be something malicious. Right. So, the best way to do that is always get the full link. But YouTube doesn't give that to you when you just click copy it. They shorten it for you. Thanks, YouTube. But I taught my robot, anytime I import a YouTube link, check it. And if it's a shortened link, convert it to the full link. And that just happens in the background. I never think about it, talking about a small skill, but I'm sure it runs many times a day because I'm putting links in constantly, and it's great.
Exactly.
It's really, this is really exciting stuff.
It is. It is.
Right.
Watching your computers use themselves is pretty cool because then you can do something else and it runs in the background and you don't have to watch it. All right. So I actually got to look at some of your early videos for the field guide and it got me excited to start building even more, giving him more tasks. So tell me about the robot assistant field guide.
Yeah. Okay. So as I got into this, I realized that this is so useful. I wanted to teach it. And so I made a robot assistant field guide. This was not on my dance card on January 1st, but now it exists. And this has been a really fun one to make. In general, just the big picture, there's 3 hours of core training. When you get it, it teaches you how to build your robot. And one of the things I did with it is I've built a robot skill that helps you build your robot. So it's the first time I ever taught something where as you go through the course, you run a skill that I give you, and it helps you actually build out your own personal robot. But the robot it builds is not the one that I built. You kind of stray from me as you go through the course to what it is that you need. It's really kind of fun. I've never done anything like this before, but people are really digging it. Like I said, it's been in the labs for a while, and I've already seen some people really successfully use it. But I also feel like because this stuff is evolving and changing, this one really needs a workshop series. So starting April 2nd for 10 weeks, we're going to do a weekly workshop. And I've got a bunch of topics like task management and like practical things about how we're going to refine the robots. And we'll get on the horn every week with Zoom, and we're going to like go through it. So there's the training plus there's the additional workshop series. This one, I think you have to do the workshop series, or at least watch the videos. All of them will be recorded and uploaded. And it's really great. And it's already getting bonus videos. That dashboard thing I talked about, I already added it on launch day. There's a new bonus video added. So it's a kind of a different product than anything I've ever made before, but it's also, I think, really a great way to get yourself up and rolling with your own robot assistant. It's $199, 10% off for MPU listeners. Use code ROBOTLAUNCH, and that'll get you 10% off. And go check it out. We'll put it in the links in the show notes. You can go to the website, read about it further. I've got the first video uploaded for a sample video. Stephen, I'd be curious what you think about that. That first video, I actually kind of plussed it up because it was going on YouTube. It's not my usual look. It's got some cuts and things in there. The rest of the course is more vanilla than that. But as a YouTube pro, I have to get your opinion on that at some point.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, I've watched multiple of the lessons, and first of all, your video, audio and video quality looks great because I've not seen a lot of your field guides before, but your setup is pretty sweet there. The first video in video 10 is great because you really show kind of what it's capable of.
Yeah.
And for me, if you've been intimidated by this kind of stuff before or the Cowork stuff, it is a little bit not complicated, but it can be a hurdle, a learning curve. And so having someone kind of handhold and walk you through the setup process, doing the training, it really is helpful. And David shows you in the field guide, like what is then possible when you get this thing really up and running and customized to you. And I think that's the magic of all the AI that we've been talking about, is these things can really be tailored to your needs, which, before there's amazing apps out there for task management and calendars, and we use so many of them, and those are all amazing. But when you can actually tailor an assistant or an app for precisely the use case that you need, it becomes so much more powerful and so much more useful. And that's exactly the idea behind this, is building that robot that can then use all those apps for you, but in a way that saves you so much time. And so, yeah.
And the core training, it's videos 1 through 9 take you through kind of step by step how to build your robot. And then video 10 is like a 46-minute version of me just throughout a day, all the times I'm using it and what I'm doing with it, and kind of a skill building kind of in-depth section.
Yeah, it's super fun.
I've had a lot of people write me that went through the course said, man, I wish I watched 10 first. Because it really gives you context of what you can do with this thing.
Right.
Although I think this episode did that as well, so you're probably okay. But my concern is if I make him watch 10 first, it's going to be overwhelming. They're like, oh, I can't do any of this stuff. But you can if you just go through and build it up slowly. You don't have to do it overnight. But I've had just some really great feedback from people. One guy just wrote me, he's like, I bought it on Friday. I spent the whole weekend building my robot. Monday morning, it was working for me. And it's like, yeah, I love hearing stories like that.
Yeah. It's awesome. And having you who have really been you're living it, for months now doing it. It's really helpful. And so, yeah, I recommend link below in the show notes.
It's just an exciting time, honestly, as a power user. Like I found myself over the last few months, sometimes just waking up like at 5 a.m. thinking about, I want to teach it that skill. And I'm so excited. I just get out of bed and just start working on it. It's fun getting a computer to dance for you. And man, you can really make it dance now.
And that's, the underlying LLM is its natural language. You don't need to know a specific coding language. You don't need to have some magic words. You can speak how you speak to train the robot. And honestly, it actually helps train it more to be tailored to you as well. Like a lot of these robots, Claude and Gemini included, as I ask it questions, I see both of them saying things like, well, since you're a Mac Studio user, and I'm like, well, wait a minute. How do you know that? Well, it's because I've asked it questions about my Mac Studio before. And that memory is what then helps you kind of get a head start on any task you might want to train in the future, because it already knows about you, your workflows, all of that, and it plays into the skills that you then build in the future.
I also just believe this is inevitably the way these things are going. And the sooner you figure it out, the more ahead of the game you are. Some of the customers have written me saying, well, I'm at a big Microsoft shop and we have limited ability to use these skills, but I'm going through the course because I want to understand how it all works. So as this stuff comes online at work, I'm the one who knows it, not, and I think there's something to that.
And developing the skill for prompting well, for instructing these LLMs well, like they're really smart, but they're not geniuses, you know what I mean? And you do have to sometimes repeat yourself or be specific in your language. And so just practicing that is a skill that you can learn as a human being communicating with these robots, so that then you can communicate more effectively for other people, helping them set up tasks or for your own automations.
But the more I do this, Stephen, the more I realize prompting is a red herring. I think the real power here is learning how to teach skills to the computer.
Right.
Teach it how to write the manual for itself and teach it how to reliably do that. So when you give it a poorly worded prompt, it still goes and follows that skill and just does the job,
Right. All right. Well, I'm curious. A couple follow-up questions, David.
Yeah.
This is all Claude.
Yeah.
Do you use any other AIs for anything now?
Yeah, I'm still working with particularly Gemini a lot, and just to see what's going on, because everybody's talking about Gemini. And I'm looking at, what ChatGPT's got up its sleeve. And I feel like one of my jobs in MacSparky Labs and on the show is to give some guidance to people who are curious about this stuff but don't want to go kicking the tires on everything. So, I'm keeping my hands on all of them, but Claude is the one that's running my robot, so it's constantly running for me. In fact, I use it so much that I've upgraded to the $100 a month plan, and because it's just working constantly. Now, I think as my robot settles in, I may be able to back down to the $20 one again, but in the process of making the field guide, I was just hitting it with so much that I was hitting that limit pretty often. But right now, I'm paying $100 a month. But honestly, even if I have to keep paying $100 a month for all the work it's doing for me, I will gladly pay $100 a month,
Yeah.
But I think the answer in the long term is, hopefully Apple gets it. If they see this and they build these kinds of tools into the Apple operating system, even if they're licensing Gemini to be the brain of it, but they build the harness, then I think I would switch over to them. And I don't think that's a problem. My skill files will transfer. Like the instructions to do a FreshBook invoice are going to apply no matter whether it's an Apple robot or an Anthropic robot following them.
Did you find while you were training your robot that the most time was spent writing those instructions, or was more time spent in the correcting process? Like, where was the majority of your time spent?
It was mainly in the correcting process. One of the things that I had to learn is that you don't go to the robot and say, I want you to create an invoice by going to the website and clicking this box and that box and this box. Instead, I say, I want an invoice that the customer will receive the PDF, and you describe the result you want, and then let it go figure it out. The actual writing the skills is, I wrote maybe 10% of the skills. the robot wrote nearly all of them, but I will go in and edit them. Like I read the skill and say, no, I don't want it. And I can just fix it with text. But the robot writes the initial draft of them. It writes the updates to them. I go and edit them. So the writing part is not hard. The robot does that. But figuring out how to get it to do the thing you want. And sometimes it goes down a left turn. And if you're watching it, you just hit the brakes, you hit the little circle button, stop it, say, nope, don't do that. You're going to the wrong service. This is what I wanted. It's also important to say when you first do something, this is what the result I want. Tell me how you think you'll do it, and let it write down. And then you can kind of set general directions. And then the next piece of it is, it takes 4 or 5 times really of run once you build a skill before it's really locked in. But I'd say after 4 or 5 times, if you're paying attention, you really don't touch it again.
Okay. So don't spend like an hour writing the initial prompt instruction. No,
get the course. Because I walk you through that, but you don't need to do that. You need to tell it what you want and let it write that stuff for you.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
All right, well, I'm going to jump back in and I'm going to add more instructions to mine. I need to watch how you do it and connect it because I've obviously not done a ton of them. So yeah, I'm going to do it.
Another key as you're building it out is frequently say, update your skills and index. Like every time you correct it on something, it will do the correction, but it's not smart enough necessarily to update the skill, and then it won't remember next time. So you have to constantly tell it. That's my most frequently used text expander snippet, AI period UP. And it says, update your skills and index, But something I've noticed recently is it's doing better at updating itself. Like when I do a correction, it says, okay, I'll fix that, and I'm updating the skill. I don't know if it's just because I've hammered it into it so many times or something behind the scenes at Anthropic is happening, but it is getting better. But you still need to constantly tell it, update your skills. Whatever you've learned, update your skills. And it's funny to me, sometimes I'll tell it to update the skill, and then you'll watch the narrative as it does that, and it corrects something that I didn't even know it did wrong. Like it says, oh, I found a new way to post, to fix a tag on WordPress, so I'm going to do it that way for now. I didn't realize it figured out a new way to do it, but when I told it to update, it went ahead and coded that into its skill set, so next time it will always use that method.
That's pretty cool. All right, I'm going to set up some more skills. I want it to be doing stuff for me so I can drop it off. So
this is powerful stuff. A lot of fun. Let me know if you're interested in Field Guide, how it goes. Let me know what you're doing with it. I love hearing robot stories at this point, what people are doing with their robots.
That's super fun. Well, let's record a more Power Users episode. Let's talk more.
Yeah.
Let's do it. And thank you to our sponsors this week, Squarespace, SaneBox, and Fundera. Links to the Robot Assistant Field Guide is down in the show notes, as well as to support this show and listen to more Power Users. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching.